Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. In this lecture, we are going to talk about something very important. Selection of an optional subject for your mains examination. In this lecture, we'll talk about the significance of an optional subject, what is the criteria that one should follow while deciding an optional subject, and we will also be dispelling some of the myths surrounding this optional subject. So let's get started. George Orwell, in his novel Animal Farm, writes, "All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others." Similarly, for your examination, all subjects are equal. All papers are equal. But there are some subjects, there are some papers which are more equal than others. Which are these subjects or papers? Number one, your essay paper. Number two, your GS paper 4, which deals with ethics, integrity, and aptitude. Number 3, your optional subject. If you are stronger in these 3 areas, there is no power on earth that can stop you from clearing this examination, and that too with a good rank. But what is the reason? I'll tell you the reason. If you look at GS paper 1, 2, and 3, they deal with history, geography, polity, economy, international relations, so on and so forth. These 17,000, 18,000 aspirants who write the mains examination every year, where do they get the content for these 3 papers? GS 1, 2, 3? All these aspirants would read the same set of NCERTs. All these aspirants would follow the same set of standard reference books. For example, Lakshmikant for polity, Ramesh Singh for economy, Bipin Chandra for modern history, so on and so forth. And all these aspirants would follow the same boring newspaper called The Hindu. So when they write answers in their mains examination, the content for almost all these answers more or less is the same. Because all these aspirants, they have the same source from which they get the content, from which they get the information. But when we look at these 3 areas, no 2 individuals can write a similar essay despite the fact that they may share a similar ideology. Similarly, no 2 individuals are going to write same answers to the case studies that are provided for in your GS paper 4 and an optional subject. All these aspirants, they don't choose a common optional subject. They choose a variety of optional subjects. Some choose public administration, some sociology, some anthropology, some literature subjects. So there we find a diversity of the answers. And remember, 500 marks are allocated to an optional subject. And if you're stronger in your optional subject, if you can break this level of 250, if you can score more than 250 in the range of 300 marks in your optional subject, definitely you are in the list. You will definitely clear this examination. So if you were going to ask me, what is the significance of an optional subject? All these papers, GS 1, 2, 3, 4, and essay, 250 marks each are allocated to these papers. But for an optional subject, 500 marks are allocated. Because of the sheer amount of marks allocated to an optional subject, this makes the optional subject one of the most important subjects in your civil services examination process. So that's the significance of an optional subject. But this is also where aspirants face a dilemma. How do I choose an optional subject? What are the factors I have to keep in mind before I can start an optional subject preparation? This is where we are going to help you with. There are 3 factors that you have to keep in mind before you start an optional subject. 3 factors shall determine which optional subject is best suited for you. Factor number 1, interest. This is the most important factor on the basis of which you should decide upon your optional subject. Why interest? To prepare for an optional subject, you have to devote at least 2 to 3 months of your preparation time. At least 2 to 3 months of your preparation time. And during this preparation time, you should have interest in that subject. If you do not have interest in that subject, you cannot devote 2 to 3 months of your preparation time to prepare for that optional. So you should be interested in a subject, then you should opt for that subject. Let's say, for example, you choose an optional subject without any interest. After a week, you will decide to switch your optional. Still, you're not interested in this optional. Then after another week, you will change this optional. So by the end of the year, you have touched almost all the optionals provided by the UPSC. So that is a sheer strategy for wasting time. Please don't do that. Interest. See in which subject you have more interest in, and if you are interested in a particular optional, you are one step closer to choose that subject as your optional subject. But interest alone will not help. Second important factor, I'll tell you, what is that? When we look at the UPSC notification, they tell us that the standard of questions that will be asked in your optional subject, what is going to be the standard of the questions that we will ask you? It's going to be 1 degree higher than your graduation standard and 1 degree lower than your post-graduation standard. That means somewhere in the middle. So the difficulty level of the questions asked in your optional subject will be 1 degree higher than your graduation level and 1 degree lower than your post-graduation level. But for engineering subjects, science-based subjects, the level will be of graduation. Or for medical science, the level will be of graduation standard. That's what UPSC tells us. But when we look at UPSC, U in UPSC stands for unpredictability. So never ever anticipate what UPSC can do or cannot do. So UPSC is a big time, if I can use this word, liar as well. When we look at the standard of these questions that are asked in the optional subjects, the standard more or less is of post-graduation level. A post-graduation degree normally takes 2 years. Here for your UPSC examination, you have to cover this optional subject in 2 months, in 2.5 months, in 3 months. Now with hand on your heart, tell me, is it possible for you to cover a subject which normally takes 2 years in less than 3 months? In 2 or 2.5 months? It is not possible. So what is the alternative? The alternative is that you should choose an optional whose syllabus is short. This is the second factor that you have to keep in mind. First factor almost is interest. If I am interested in this optional, then I have to take into account factor number 2. Is the syllabus for this optional short? If both these conditions are satisfied, you are again one more step closer to decide this as your optional subject. But third factor is of even more important significance, and that is the past record of this optional. This optional should be scoring as well. Because ultimately, why do you choose an optional? You don't have to conduct researches in that optional subject. You don't have to publish papers in that optional subject. You are choosing this optional subject so that you can get good marks in excess of 275, closer to 300, so that you can see your name in the list released by the UPSC, because you ultimately want to clear this examination. So for that, you have to choose an optional which is scoring as well. The past record of that optional should be scoring, and that is how you can decide upon your optional subject. 3 factors you have to keep in mind. Number 1, interest in that optional. Number 2, short syllabus. Number 3, past record of that optional. These are the 3 factors you have to keep in mind. But based on these three factors, which is the best optional for your civil services examination? I'll give you a list. Number one, a literature subject. Tamil, Telugu, Kannada literature. If you are stronger in these literature subjects, please opt for it. Why? Let's assume I'm from Tamil Nadu and I take Tamil literature as my optional subject. Who is going to set this question paper? Who is going to write these answers? Who is going to evaluate these answers? Don't you think there will be an element of bias involved? These are not my words. UPSC annual reports tell us that the best performing optional subjects in civil services examination are these literature subjects. But there is a catch here. If you are good in a literature subject, please opt for it. It is not that after watching this lecture, you say that since literature is a good scoring subject, I'll opt for Kannada literature as my optional subject, but you're from Punjab. It's going to boomerang on you. If you are good in a literature subject, please opt for it. But if you're not good in a literature subject, then which is the best optional available for you? I would suggest take any science-based subject. Physics, chemistry, botany, civil engineering, mechanical engineering, mathematics. But why? What is the reason? The answers to these questions, the solutions to these questions are either correct or incorrect. That means there is a possibility that you can score good marks in these subjects provided your answer is correct. That means in these subjects, we focus on objectivity and not subjectivity. What do I mean here? Let's say, for example, I take a humanities subject, I take sociology, or I take political science and international relations. There is an element of subjectivity involved. If I'm evaluating your answers, I can tell myself, no, I'm not happy with this answer. You should have written it like this. You should not have written this. You should have quoted this scholar. You should not have quoted this scholar, so on and so forth. So that means there is an element of subjectivity involved when I'm evaluating your humanities-based subjects or social science-based subjects. But science-based subjects are all based on objectivity. So there is a high possibility that you can score good in these science-based optional subjects. But yes, there is a catch here. Even if you're scoring 500 out of 500 in, let's say, mathematics, you will not be awarded 500 marks. Your marks will be scaled down. But even after scaling down these marks, you will still be somewhere around 275 to 300 or even sometimes more than 300 as well. So that means you will have an edge over others. So how can you decide upon an optional? If you're good in a literature subject, please opt for it. If not, if you're good in a science-based subject, please opt for it. If not, then all these optional subjects more or less are same. But even here, there are some optional subjects which are better than others. Which are these optional subjects? Sociology, anthropology, public administration, philosophy, geography, political science and international relations, psychology as well. So that means if you are not good in a literature subject, you are not good in a science-based subject, then you can choose any of these optionals mentioned in the UPSC notification. And these subjects have an edge over other subjects in one aspect. And which is that aspect? You have ready-made content available for these optionals. That means since these are very popular optional subjects, just go to a bookshop and you will find ready-made content available for these optional subjects. So that all you have to do, buy that content, read it, underline the important areas, and appear for the test series. You don't have to read multiple books, then extract notes from these multiple books, then prepare this optional subject, then revise, and then appear for the test series. You have a ready-made content available for these optional subjects. But how can you decide whether I should choose a literature subject or a science-based subject or anyone from this list. Take a look at the syllabus and take a look at previous 3 years question papers. Now, when you look at the syllabus, when you look at previous 3 years question papers, it is possible that you may not be in a position to answer any of these questions or most of these questions, but at least you will have an idea. No, the topics mentioned in the syllabus are very interesting. I think I should opt for it. No, the subjects, no, the questions that are asked in the examination, I think if I can study honestly, I will be in a position to answer these questions. That is how you will have to choose an optional subject. 3 factors to keep in mind. Interest. Number 2, short syllabus. Number 3, past record of that optional. But how do you decide? Take a look at the syllabus of 2 or 3 or 4 optional subjects and compare them. See in which optional subject your inclination is more as against the other optional subject. Also take a look at previous 3 years, at least previous 3 years question papers, just to get an idea which can help you to decide an optional subject quickly. But here, please keep one thing in mind. Do not rush. Take your time, even if after a month of your preparation or 2 months of your preparation, you decide upon an optional, that is even better. Do not be in any hurry to decide an optional subject. It's going to prove very, very costly. So what are we talking about? We discussed the significance of an optional subject. We also talked about the factors, the criteria that you have to keep in mind before you can decide upon your optional subject. Now, let us dispel some of the myths surrounding this optional subject. Myth number 1, you don't have to choose 2 subjects. You have to choose only one optional subject, but this optional subject will be bifurcated into 2 papers. Let's say, for example, you are taking sociology as your optional subject. Sociology, only one optional subject you have to take, but this sociology will be bifurcated into sociology paper 1, sociology paper 2, public administration paper 1, public administration paper 2. You don't have to choose 2 optional subjects. Myth number 2, I can take an optional subject only if I have graduated in that subject. It's a myth. If you are a medical science doctor, you can take public administration as well. If your language is not being Hindi, but you can still take Hindi as your optional subject. A mathematics student can take history as his optional subject. So you don't have to be a graduate in that subject for you to choose that optional subject. No. Myth number 3, you should choose an optional which can help you in your GS as well. It's a myth. Please don't fall into this trap. Let's say, for example, this is your mains examination for your GS. The amount of knowledge, content, information that you require is that of a superficial level. But for your optional subject, you have to dig much, much deeper. So do not take an optional subject just for the reason that it is going to help you in your GS subject as well. No, don't do that. Only 3 factors you have to keep in mind. Interest, short syllabus, and the past record of that optional. Only these 3 factors should drive your decision. Myth number 4, for your 2019 examination, don't select an optional because optional subject is going to disappear from this examination. Now, this is something that we have been hearing since 2013. But nothing of this sort has happened. Optional subject is still retained by the UPSC. We may never know what's going to happen tomorrow. Maybe, yes, from 2019, there won't be any optional. Or from 2020, there won't be any optional. But what if there is an optional subject? What if the optional subject is retained by the UPSC? Then you're going to waste a lot of time. So unless and until there is an official declaration by the UPSC that from next year onwards, there won't be an optional subject, don't even think about it. Assume that optional subject is there and it's going to continue there. Please understand one thing. Optional subject plays the most important role in your success. If you are stronger in an optional subject, definitely you will clear this examination. And these are the things that I wanted to communicate to you, which can possibly help you in deciding the right optional subject for your examination. And before I end this session, let me reiterate. You have to choose an optional subject only for one selfish reason, so that you can get good marks in this examination. Don't let emotion decide your optional subject. Be practical in deciding your optional subject, because this optional subject is going to decide the next phase of your life. If you need further information about an optional subject, please write your comments so that we can get back to you. Thank you for watching.